I looked a little bit at your stuff and I noticed you're a big Lovecraft fan. Is that true?
Yes, I've been I've been reading Lovecraft ever since when I was a little boy. My parents were very cheap, and so instead of hiring a babysitter, they would just drop me off at the library. And unfortunately, they dropped me off at a library that had a big shelf of Lovecraft books, old Arkham House books.
Oh, that's awesome.
So blame it on my parents. And it worked out fine. I enjoyed all those books, and it gave me a solid background in Lovecraftian lore.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't see his stuff. I wasn't even aware of his stuff until probably I was like right at the end of high school, 18, and when I first saw it, it just blew me away. Are you familiar with the Michael Whelan cover art like editions that came out like in the late 80s, early 90s? Like there were compilations of his stories. Like that was my first exposure to Lovecraft, and I remember I got them at like there used to be Tower Records back then. I go to like Tower Books and they had it, and I was kind of blown away because until then I hadn't really seen anything that grabbed me quite as much as Lovecraft did.
Now, I was grabbed by Lovecraft back when I was a kid, back when dinosaurs ruled the earth. And so the books that I had access to in that library was old Arkham House books edited by August Derleth, the original stories by Lovecraft himself. So got mine straight from the source. So I'm just lucky that I came from a very small town. I was just very lucky that a small town library would have, you know, a whole shelf full of books like that. So I must have that library must have had a librarian who was who loved his or her Arkham House.
Yeah, no, that's it's pretty impressive. It's pretty strange because I know that he like now he made a resurgence and everybody loves his stuff. But back in the day, it was considered almost like fan fiction. It was like he got basically no respect. Nobody bought his stuff. I mean, horror in general didn't sell that well back then, but he definitely never made it to the level of like Edgar Allan Poe or anyone like that.
Now, what decades are you talking about? Back when you discovered Lovecraft?
Uh, Late 80s, early 90s. I was still in high school. It was like my senior year of high school, and as I was about halfway through my senior year, this is when I first had my exposure to his stuff. It kind of blew my mind.
See, I'm talking about the 70s, which is pretty unusual considering I'm only 29 years old.
Hmm.
It must be some bizarre time travel thing enforced by the great old ones, I think.
Maybe they're secretly pulling the string.
Well, with me being Nyarlathotep's cousin and all that, I'm almost as old as him.
That
I'm
was,
a few months younger than him.
yeah. All right, so let's move back into your writing career a little bit. Did you start that off right away, or did it take you a while to get into that? Because you told me you were what you were the manager at a high energy nightclub.
Oh, I did promotions for them. I was a freelance person, but I did their promotions for the high energy nightclub. Yeah, that
Okay,
was back in the 80s.
what did that entail? Was it like were you doing like ads for that? I mean, there wasn't really the internet. Was it more like like print ads? Was it what were they? What did it involve?
Ads, press releases, getting the word out about creating flyers, um, all the things that people used to do back in the day to get it on radio, TV shows, things like that. Everything before the internet. And now I do all that same stuff for different clients, but on the internet too.
Okay,
So all I did was just add the internet. The internet is just a tool. You
right.
still have to, what I do is public relations. You still have to, all about getting the word out about different things because you can be doing the best things in the world, but if no one knows about it, it's like you're doing it all by yourself. That's what public relations does. It's you find the best way to get the message out to the world.
No, I totally agree. So, was there a time when you transitioned from doing more of that to more writing?
I've been writing stories and haven't had stories published in different magazines ever since I was a teenager. My first story was published when I was 17 years old. Many millions of forests have had to been reduced to wood pulp so that they could create the paper that turned into the magazines that became my various stories and books.
Well, now they're all digital, so so no.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. Finally, before the world is reduced to extinction because of my prolific writing, they finally figured out how to put it all on the internet so that all the trees don't have to die. I was feeling kind of guilty about that. So, so I guess the planet will live after all.
Well, every time that they clear down more trees, they find like hidden tribes in the Amazon rainforest.
Well, it's a big world. It's a very busy world. Have you read about the latest thing they're going to do to plug up those ozone holes in the ozone layer?
No.
I guess it's something like silicone bubbles that they're going to try to get up in the air. I don't know. I got to read more about it, but I guess it's silicone gas or silicone, some kind of silicone assembly that they're going to get up there to clog up those holes in the ozone layer that's causing premature global warming.
I don't know. I have the feeling that's going to backfire. Whenever there's a giant government plan, it usually backfires.
And if not, we'll find something else to fix it. We're not all going to curl up and die like insects. We still got to keep moving, still got to keep going.
Well, I don't think we're going to curl up and die. I mean, there's a lot of the world that's like frozen tundra right now, and people can move there. I don't know if you follow any of Graham Hancock stuff. He talks about like giant meteors hitting the earth and wiping out humanity on the coastline, so the people that survive are the people inside the middle of continents, and those are usually the more primitive people. So it's kind of like almost like society gets rebooted every like 10,000 years or so. Are you familiar with that concept?
Well, you know that the Antarctic ice cap is melting around the edges. Big chunks of the Antarctica are falling off into the ocean, and they're wondering how soon the oceans are going to rise because of that and how high they're going to rise. So we will see. We will see. Hopefully they'll be able to fix that too.
I don't know. Well, there is stuff like there's definitely a warming trend, but I also hear all sorts of conflicting stuff about like, well, this froze more and this thawed more. And I know there's a whole bunch going into that, but Graham Hancock's theory was just that if there are unlivable places, that when like the more livable places get decimated, then people still survive in the less livable places, and that's how humanity keeps going. And I was just saying, like if you look at most of Canada, it's frozen wasteland right now. So if it thaws out, maybe more people will move there.
Well, I don't know. One part of the world gets warmer, but then another one will get colder.
Yeah.
This last winter was especially brutal. So who knows? And now this summer is supposed to be scorching hot. So maybe we're transferring it to a time in the world when we're alternating between extreme heat and extreme cold. We will see.
Well, people definitely have not figured out the weather. The whole like butterfly effect is definitely present. People say, "Oh, it's getting colder. Oh, it's getting warmer." It's like there's so many factors in there. It's hard to determine.
What does that tattoo on your forehead say? What is that?
Well, you know that if you look at the Necronomicon, there's this like made-up language that details all the demon rituals and all that stuff. And in that made-up language, this says death.
Who made up that version of the Necronomicon?
I don't remember. I don't remember what I got it from. Because it's been years and my memory's not the greatest. But I remember there's like, I don't know if it's like Raylan or whatever, but it's like that made up language. And in that made up language, at least in one person's interpretation of it, that meant the word death.
Well, I write a lot of Lovecraftian stories, but I try to inject a lot of modern day things into it. For example, like modern day technology, actual characters on the internet. um, and also sometimes I have gay, lesbian, and transsexual characters. Sometimes characters of different ethnic qualities, different ethnic backgrounds. Because in most Lovecraft stories, they're all white people from New England. And you know what? There's a lot more people in the whole world than just a few white people in New England. Nobody in any Lovecraft story ever expressed any sexuality whatsoever. So were they gay? Were they straight? Who knows? All they did was read the Necronomicon all day.
Well,
they really didn't express any kind of lifestyle choices.
well, Lovecraft was a very tormented figure. Like his mom always told him he was extremely ugly. She often kept him locked in the house, and then I don't know. And he had this small area, and he just seemed like a kind of a nervous guy that was scared of everything. And when he finally moved to Brooklyn to be with his new wife, it was like a game change for him. And for a while, he didn't even go out of the house.
Wait, you know what Lovecraft's parents died of?
No.
Lovecraft's dad was a traveling salesman, and from what I hear, he died of syphilis.
Oh yeah, no.
And that's what his mother.
Yeah, I did read that.
And his mother got syphilis from the dad. And so both of his parents died of third stage syphilis, where there's mental illness.
Right.
And they both had to be put in mental institutions. And Lovecraft worried his whole life that he would end up like his parents and end up in a mental institution. But, he wasn't much of a player. So he didn't have anybody who he could get syphilis off of. So there was no chance of him getting syphilis.
Right.
It's easy to not get syphilis if you're a virgin. So he had no worries about going syphilis crazy like his parents did. But it was all the dad's fault. The mom was just stay-at-home mom who unfortunately had a traveling husband who had a wandering eye.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, and I think I've read some of that because I've read extensive stuff on Lovecraft. I just I have so much going on. I don't have the best memory, and sometimes I forget details. But yeah, I seem to recall that. I do recall that he was a very very kind of isolated figure that he didn't like to go out to loud events with a lot of people. So he had a very very limited perspective on the world. And I know as his work goes along towards the later stages, like at the Mountains of Madness and stuff like that, he was getting a little bit more open. He was starting to see more going on. He started to see a wider perspective.
Well, he did eventually meet that at a writer's event. He met that Sonia Green, and they did get married. But they weren't married for a very long time because she decided to go to California for her hat making business. And he just decided to stay behind. He told her, you go on, I'm going to stay here. He could not see himself in California. She did go to California and mail him the divorce papers. He signed them, but he never mailed them back. He didn't mail them to the officials. So when she went out to California, she figured that he'd mailed in the divorce papers. So she got remarried.
Yeah.
And she didn't know that she was a bigamist because he never sent in the divorce papers. So then she went on with her life, and he went on with his life until he died of malnutrition-related cancer of his intestines.
Well, I know he had cancer, and he's such he's such an isolationist that he had trouble going to the doctor. And when he finally went to the doctor, they're like, it's way too late. Although in that era, probably there wasn't much they can do for cancer, period.
Well, and also he had a horrible diet. It was like he only, if I remember correctly, he only ate ice cream and bread and cheese and beans. My cat eats better than that, So he wasn't doing too well in the dietary department. There's these things called vegetables. I guess you're supposed to eat them every now and then. He didn't know that.
He obviously had some issues, and he was probably too focused on one thing to look at the broader perspective. And unfortunately, it killed him.
Well, unfortunately, I think back then he probably, like you said, he probably just concentrated on the topics he loved and never gave much thought to that he should probably be living a healthier lifestyle. He probably never thought about it. He probably just thought, like most people back then, he probably just thought, just eat whatever you got and that'll be fine.
No, but I think that a lot of stuff like eating healthy and the benefits and all that, it wasn't widely known. I mean, and like all they didn't have the internet. They had like printed press, and even that wasn't you know completely distributed everywhere. It's like often they tend to focus on local issues. And yeah, you didn't have all these fitness gurus and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm sure in a little bit he was kind of a victim of his era. His mom used to tell him he was ugly all the time and wouldn't even let him out of the house. So he had some he had a hard upbringing, definitely. But I'm sure you'd be amazed to see how much his legacy has pervaded everything these days. Like a lot of people aren't even aware, with they aren't aware that all their favorite authors took big cues off him, like Stephen King and Dean Arcus and all that stuff.
Yeah, he has been an influence on so many writers. You don't even know. People don't realize, for example, how many references to Lovecraft there are in Stephen King's work. So he was a big influence on Stephen King, just like Edgar Allan Poe was a big influence on H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh yeah,
it's all a big legacy. Now, there's some little kid out there who I'll be his influence, and then he'll be the big hot writer of 2,500, and I'll never know because I'll be dead by then.
Yeah, well,
unless they can put my brain in a robot, I'm still thinking about that, trying to get that figured out.
Both Poe and H.P. Lovecraft would be very wealthy if they grew up in the Stephen King era, but Instead, we got Stephen King, and I like Stephen King. I'm not busting on Stephen King. I'm just saying, like, unfortunately, they were before their time.
Well, you got to remember, Lovecraft kind of kept to himself, and Poe drank a lot. So even if they had been in different eras, who's to say if they would have been successful? They had the talent, but did they have the drive to make it happen? Were they outgoing? Were they able to make business connections? I think Poe might have been too busy drinking to worry about calling his agent.
Well, I've also heard that Poe, he lacked some of the enzymes to digest alcohol properly, so less than the normal amount of alcohol would make him tanked. So that could also be a possibility. But I think that, like, both with Poe and Lovecraft, the thing that really helped to bring them to the masses was people were fans of their work and people promoted it. And I think if we had like the internet and stuff like that, it would have been way easier for that stuff to get across. And even if Lovecraft wasn't, hugely social by himself, just the fact that his stuff had so much unique quality to it, it probably would have burst him out of the box. It probably would have done it for him.
Well, he did write a lot of letters. Have you ever read the letters of H.P. Lovecraft?
I've read some of them. I know he was what's the guy? The guy who invented Conan. I know he was like pen pals with that guy. So
Robert E. Howard, yeah.
Yeah, I know that he's written more letters than he has actual works, and some of his most famous works he didn't even publish. Like later on, people found it and they go, "Oh, this is great," and they got it published.
He lived in a kind of a low tech time, so who knows how well he would have done if he'd have had all the resources we have today at his disposal. He probably would have done better. Considering he liked writing letters, maybe he'd have done great doing emails. That's letters.
Yeah.
He might have done better with email.
It's true, although people pay a lot more attention to his stories than they do his letters, Like, even though he wrote more of the letters, most people, like if you ask a lot of people who Lovecraft was, they wouldn't know. But if you said, "Have you heard of Cthulhu?" they go, "Oh, yeah, Cthulhu, I know."
Cthulhu's been on South Park. He must be a star.
Yeah. So I think his fantastic vision of everything, really, I think that was his lasting legacy.
Well, have you ever read his long story? I think it was practically a novella. I don't think it was long enough to be a novel, or maybe a short novel. Have you ever read The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath?
Yeah, I've actually read all of his stuff. I'm a huge Lovecraft fan. Some of it has been a while, so I don't remember all the details of it, but I know I've read all of it at some point.
He has had a huge body of work, and really, most people know Lovecraft from a few movies that have been made out of his work, but the remainder of his work are brilliant works like The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath that goes into the dreamlands, and most people aren't even familiar with that, and that's there's some beautiful writing there and some amazing stories, and it's just it's a pity that none of that has made it to the big screen yet, but hopefully people can still read it. For that matter, they can read it online for free. There are websites out there that have Lovecraft stories on them. There will be more movies made out of all of his work eventually, because like you said, considering he's been dead a long time, he is a rising star.
That's kind of what happens with artists. You cut off your ear and then you die, and then suddenly you're pinning yourself for millions of dollars. A lot of people, they have taken cues off his work and they've incorporated this stuff, and people don't even know this Lovecraft. Like the movies Hellboy, and Hellboy 2, huge Lovecraft influences. Like some of that stuff is straight up Lovecraft. The Mist, like the Stephen King short story that became a movie, that he even said that's his ode to Lovecraft. The Thing from Another World, there's a lot of stuff that basically Lovecraft invented that stuff, and people don't even know that he exists.
Now, one of my most recent books, it's a little book. It's called Umbra Sapiens. That's Latin for shadow of a wise man. And basically, it's my theory that shadow people, I tie them in with Lovecraft, with the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. I tie them in along with Bigfoot. I found a way to tie in Bigfoot with Lovecraft, because I think most of the unexplained things in the world can somehow be tied in with Lovecraft. Though I haven't tied in the Loch Ness Monster yet. Don't think I will. I think that's kind of an obvious one.
With the Loch Ness Monster is a Lovecraft kind of monster, but I think
Cthulhu is kind of like a Lovecraft. Cthulhu is kind of like a Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Big thing that came out of the sea.
Well, there's a theory that the locks, loch is just their word for lake. So the locks are so incredibly deep they can't see the bottom of them, and they think that there at least at one point there were caverns, and basically there were tunnels underground that led to the ocean. So it's possible that 80% of the oceans are unexplored. So it's possible a deep sea creature made it through one of those tunnels into the loch, and that could be the Loch Ness Monster. It's like a creature from like a million years ago or 100 million years ago. Because we find stuff that we thought died long ago that will wash up on shore in like Japan or whatever, and we're like, what the fuck is this? And it'll character or a thing that we thought was extinct is not extinct.
Maybe I'm related to the Loch Ness Monster, Mark McLaughlin.
Yeah.
Because the loch in Laughlin means lake.
Yeah.
My name means son of the guy who lives by the lake, is what I guess it actually means. So maybe he's my cousin.
Maybe you're related to Dagon somehow, the fish people from the Shadow of Innsmouth. Maybe that made it into your bloodline. So I don't know. It's possible.
I think so. I think you got me there. I'm one of them guys. Although the fact that I don't know how to swim would probably make me a pretty bad resident of Innsmouth. I don't think I do too well. If it came to sink or swim, I'd probably sink.
Right. Well, there's I forget what the director's name is, but the director who did The Reanimator, and then he did From Beyond, which are both obviously based off Lovecraft stories. And then he was trying real hard to get money to make a third Lovecraft-based film, and he finally made it. It's called Dagon. I don't think it's that good. It's set in Italy. It's you could tell that the budget just wasn't there. But have you seen that movie?
I did. I liked it. it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't as good as From Beyond, but still, it had its own different qualities. I liked it.
All right, so
Okay.
moving back to what you're doing now, what are you focusing on?
Well, I got some new releases. Another one is a take. It's a small book of modern updates on old fairy tales and old folklore called The Spiderweb Tree.
Okay.
All this is on Amazon. Spiderweb Tree, 18 different folklore tale, my modern version of old folklore tales, and also 5 more urban legends in the back, my version of urban legends. And also I told you about Umbra Sapiens, in which I talk about all the obscure creatures that live in our society that hide among us. There's a whole section in the back called Phantasmopedia. That's an alphabetical list of beasts that live hidden among us. And I'm also big into the writings of Robert W. Chambers. And a couple years ago, I released The Prisoner of Carcosa, based on the King in Yellow,
Yeah.
which takes place in the city of Carcosa.
Yeah.
And so I got some stories based on Carcosa too,
I have a. I don't know if
because
you see the tattoo, the yellow sign I have tattooed on me.
oh, I thought I saw something there.
Yeah.
The yellow sign.
Yeah.
There you go. Have you found the yellow sign? Yeah, it's right here.
No, I mean, like once I heard that he was an inspiration, or he was like in some way, I know that Lovecraft liked the stuff that Robert Chamberlain did, or something like that. Once I found out about that, I looked it up, and so I own it's the Book of the Yellow Sign. It has a couple of his stories, and they're awesome horror stories. And then I guess because horror didn't sell in that era, he started doing romance stories. So it's like, probably about 2/3 of the book are these awesome horror stories, and then all of a sudden there are these like really bland like romance stories. But apparently that's where he made all his money, so that's what he had to do.
And the funny thing about it is, all of his horror stuff, the yellow sign stuff, the King in Yellow stuff, that's still popular today.
Right.
But he had best-selling novels, fashionable novels about not sex lives, the romantic lives of models back then, and they're all completely forgotten and out of print. So he should have stuck with the horror. But he's got other works that were interesting, almost science fictional works, like one about a mystical zoo. I think it was something like that. And he had a lot of other stuff. He was all over the place, but he was still a fun writer. He really hit his stride, though, with The King in Yellow, and he should have done more with that. But he was distracted, like you said, by writing those romances and things, which was more his bread and butter. More of his money came out of that at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the horror stuff. I mean, today it would have been a bestseller, but back then I don't think that really went across very well. I think it's like he was good at that. He tried it. He just wasn't making a career off of it. Like back in those days, I knew people would try like 4, 5, 6 careers until they found something that made them money they could live off of.
Well, or you get people who like to write about a lot of different topics because they just like their mind goes in a lot of different directions.
Right.
Do you know what for example, do you know what a giallo movie is?
No.
A giallo?
No.
A giallo is an Italian movie, any Italian movie from the 60s or 70s that usually has a masked killer who's usually stalking beautiful women or just basically killing people, and you don't find out until the last 15 minutes about who the killer is. Nope. There are just dozens of old giallos. And see, that's a whole genre of fiction from Italy, from the past, that there still are giallos being made, but people don't realize what a big influence those were. Right. For example, if you watch all the old giallos, you'll soon find one that was called Bay of Blood. Have you ever watched Bay of Blood?
No.
If you did watch Bay of the Blood, a Bay of Blood, and I think it's on YouTube, you can find it on YouTube probably. Um, you'll soon realize that it was made a couple years before Friday the 13th, and it has a lot in common with Friday the 13th. So I can't help but wonder if it was the inspiration for Friday the 13th. A mysterious killer in a house by a lake. And you know, even down to people getting speared to death, things like that.
I read that Sean Cunningham, the guy who invented Friday the 13th, like they became a series and he only directed the first one. But I heard that, because I'm a big fan of that stuff, I consider Jason Voorhees to be the best creature in the worst movies. Like the movies they're all like trashy, like low budget movies, but he's an awesome killer, like a zombie killer with a hockey mask. But so somebody bought me the book called Crystal Lake Memories, which talks about the whole process, and it's a pretty thick book. And he's basically his idea was, hey, Halloween is making a lot of money. How can I bite off Halloween without getting sued? Like that was his whole idea. I'll come up with the slasher film and make it just different enough I won't get sued.
Well, I've watched over the past 20 or more years, I've watched dozens of giallos, and I eventually wrote a novel that has nothing to do with Lovecraft, but it's my own version of a giallo called Human Doll.
Okay.
For some reason, it's about two TV shows. One is a TV show about people getting plastic surgery procedures, and they're all beautiful people getting plastic surgery procedures. And the other one is competitions among drag queens, and they're all full of beautiful people, and somebody is killing off all the beautiful people, and the drag queens. They're killing off the most beautiful people in the world. And that's what Human Doll is about. Somebody who's killing off all the beautiful people in the world. Why would anybody want to do that? Don't we like looking at beautiful people? Of course we do. But so that was inspired by the whole giallo concept of finding that all the victims are people who are members of two different TV shows. And why would anybody be trying to kill the beautiful people involved with two different TV shows? And the idea came to me one day and I turned it into a novel. So I think a lot of writers, including, Robert W. Chambers, they got a lot of different ideas in their head and they eventually turned them all into different books.
Okay.
Except Robert W. Chambers, it was inspired by models and all that. And he was also inspired by the occult, which made him write about the King in Yellow.
Right.
You just find your different inspiration and you take it in different directions.
So do you have with all the stuff you write, do you have like a common theme? Like have you, ever since you started writing, had roughly the same idea, or has it changed significantly over time?
I would say that the big theme throughout everything I write is monsters. Almost everything. And yes, there is a monster of a sort. I won't say what it is or who it is in Human Doll, but ultimately everything I write about concerns monsters. And I think, they talk about branding, how people should be known for their branding. So I guess my brand would be the Monster Maker. I Monster Maker McLaughlin. I like monsters. I always write about different kinds of monsters. Some are human monsters. Some are organic monsters. Some are monsters out of different forms of mythology. Some are monsters out of different forms of Lovecraft. But I think it all boils down to monsters.
Okay, have you always been that way? Has it always been your focus?
Yes, I think so, without even realizing it.
Okay. How old were you when you wrote your first book? Like, I remember the first book I wrote is horrible now. I wouldn't recommend anybody read it, but I wrote it when I was in 5th grade.
Oh, I was writing stories, in grade school, but my first story was published in Space and Time magazine when I was 17. So, and since then I've had over 1,000 different stories published in America, England, and Australia. I've just been writing nonstop ever since. I started out when I was 17 and I haven't stopped. I've been writing for more than 40 years. I've been writing for longer than Lovecraft was ever alive, and that's going from birth to death.
Well, if I put that together, that makes you 57.
I'm older than that.
Wow. Okay.
I'm in my 60s. I'm in my 60s.
I'm a big fan of Alan Moore. He's like the British author who did. He wrote Watchmen. He wrote From Hell. He wrote a bunch of like.
I've heard of him.
He wrote a bunch.
I've heard of him. I've never read any of his stuff, but I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I like his stuff. I think he's a really underrated author. He writes books now, but he was writing for a long time. He was writing comic books and graphic novels, and they're some of, I think, some of the best on the market. But anyways, regardless, I was going to say he wrote like a graphic novel kind of roughly based on the Lovecraft Dagon story. And it really, like, it gets really sexualized and really, like, almost like pornographic. And I was like, that would not be Lovecraft. Like, that stuff he would have taboo. So it's like...
Yeah, Lovecraft did not go into that territory. You know, I guess he probably did have sex with Sonia, but they were only married for 6 months, so there was a very limited window of opportunity there. Yeah. He wasn't a big sex machine out there in Providence, Rhode Island.
Right now, are you mainly focusing on short stories, longer stories, or are you trying to get anything made into like a Netflix series, or what are you up to right now?
Well, I'm always writing stories. I'm always working on novels. I do have a lot of novels out, but it takes. My 3 main novels are Human Doll and The Hell Next Door, and another one, a Lovecraftian novel called Injectables, about a woman in Innsmouth who runs a off the radar surgical enhancement clinic and what she's doing there. So I'm always working on novels. I have a few novels out, and I'm working on a novel right now, in fact. Mostly short stories, because I'm mostly known for short stories. I've written over 1,000 over the years, and I've released over the years over 20 different short story collections. So I always got the short stories going on. And I don't have anything going on Netflix. So come on, Netflix, come and get me. Come on, I'm here for you. I'm willing to work with you. We'll set up a deal, Haven't gotten into movies yet, but you know what? It'll probably be like Lovecraft. The minute I die, suddenly the movies, all the studios will be making big movies out of my stuff. 2 minutes after I die, you just watch.
It seems to be the way it happens, yeah. Especially if you don't renew the rights. If you don't renew the rights, they'll definitely do it. If they got to pay somebody...
Well, I don't have any kids either, so I can't leave the rights to my kids.
Yeah.
I'll leave them to my cat.
Well, Lovecraft was a big fan of cats. He preferred cats over dogs.
Oh, well, who doesn't? Oh, and speaking of cats, I also got to start a book of stories called The House of the Ocelot. There's a lot of cat-related horror stories in there, too.
I think my favorite type of cats are the Sphinx cats, like the hairless cats.
Oh, yeah, I love those. I love all cats.
They look weird. They're more affectionate. They're just I think if I was going to go with cats, that would be the kind of cat that I would go with.
Well, because they don't any further, they're always cold. They want to snuggle up with you.
Exactly. Well, I mean, maybe it's self-serving, but hey, it works for me.
That's all right. My cat, for the record, is a 20-pound Bombay cat.
Okay.
They're solid black with green eyes.
What are the ones that they have a really soft personality? Like you pick them up and they just melt in your hands. I know Joe Rogan was talking about like it's like a Mancoon, I think, or something like that.
No, mine's what you call a Bombay cat. It's just a big breed of totally black cat. No white stripes or nothing. No stripes like a tabby. No white spots. Just totally black with green eyes, and they're always large. They're always at least 16 pounds or more. But mine is just as meek as a little lamb. He'd rather hide under the bed than cuddle with you.
Okay, so this is going kind of long, so we'll wrap it up pretty soon. But I have a couple questions I want to ask you. One, what do you do for promotion? Like, how do you get your stuff out there? Do you have like a website? Do you?
Yes, I do. B Movie Monster. It's called bmoviemonster.com. Or you can just search on my name and the word horror, and stuff will come up. Mark McLaughlin horror. Type that into Google, and a lot of stuff will come up. Or just look on Amazon. I got tons of stuff on Amazon.
Amazon sells everything. So, do you have other sites as well, like Barnes and Nobles? Do they sell your stuff?
I concentrate on Amazon.
Okay. So,
I'm sure there's stuff online in all the other sites. I'm sure it's also on Books a Million and all that stuff. But I just concentrate on Amazon because that seems like the place to concentrate on. It's the big one.
okay, yeah, I hear you. So, when you write a story, like, what do you do as far as editing? Do you like send it to other people? Do you reread it a few times and revise it? What's your process?
My process is very simple. I write it, then I set it aside for a week, and then I come back to it. And usually if there's anything that needs fixing, I can usually, after a week's over, enough time has passed that I can see if anything needs fixing.
Okay.
And that's it. I don't have a committee or a bunch of specialists to help me. I am a specialist. I've been the PR director of over 5 different ad agencies over the years. I am a specialist. I don't need too many helpers.
Hey, well, when you premiere it, like, do you go on Facebook and say, "Hey, I have a new workout. You should check it out"?
Oh yeah, I've got media on about like a dozen different social media platforms. So I spread it through all my social media platforms. That's the main way that I get my word out.
So, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, like say Netflix, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I suppose that they could become my friend on Facebook and then start sending me messages there. That's what people do when they want to get in touch with me these days.
Well, in the conversation with this question, so I noticed a lot of people like Mike Mignola, who invented Hellboy, when he was putting it out in Dark Horse Comics and Image Comics. I don't remember if it was Dark Horse Image, but I remember they were putting it out, and it was making waves among people who read that stuff, but it wasn't really common knowledge. And then when Hollywood came calling and they gave him money, then he stopped drawing. Like, he still writes on the Hellboy, but he pretty much stopped drawing Hellboy except for covers. And like, it seems like he has less output now that he has some money in his pocket. So what would happen with you if the same thing occurred? If somebody came and they like paid you a chunk of money for one of your stories, would you start writing less? Would you start doing less?
I've always been one person who was always writing. Whenever there was a spare minute, I'm there writing. I don't see why I would change regardless of how much money I had. I still like telling my stories. The story's got to come out somehow. If I don't tell the story, my head might explode. Then I'll write a story about that.
Like Scanner style, where your head explodes?
Exactly, and then the cat will eat it.
Well,
The Day My Cat Ate My Brains by Mark McLaughlin.
Yeah. Well, cats will eat you. Like dogs won't, but cats will. So that's a possibility.
Sure you're right.
But all right, man. Thanks for doing
He's
this.
just waiting for my brain to explode because he knows it would be pretty darn tasty. He's pretty hungry.
All right. Well, on that note, let's wrap this up. Thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much for contacting me and talking with me.
Yeah.
And so keep in touch.